Welcome to the Allison Knows podcast. Today, we are diving deep into a topic that's both fascinating and a little bit eerie, the intersection of astrology and geopolitics. We'll be exploring predictions for early 2025, based on interviews with two really compelling astrologers, Kathy Beale and Hogarth. Both offer unique perspectives, and believe me, there are some surprising overlaps in what they're seeing. So buckle up, because we're about to unpack some potentially world-altering events that might just make you look at current events in a whole new light.
It's always intriguing to see how astrologers connect these seemingly separate realms, the movements of planets, and the unfolding of events on the world stage. It really challenges us to think about influences beyond the obvious.
Right. And both Beale and Hogarth emphasize that early 2025 is shaping up to be a period of intense transformation, both personally and globally. A sort of cosmic reset button is about to be hit.
Absolutely. And several key astrological events are contributing to this feeling of change and uncertainty. We're still feeling the effects of Mars retrograde, which ends on February 23rd. Now, Mars is all about action, energy, and assertiveness. So when it appears to move backward from our perspective here on Earth, it can signal a time of reevaluation, a sort of cosmic do-over.
And what's really interesting is that Mars was in retrograde during those last few weeks of the 2024 U.S. election, which, as you can imagine, was already a pretty tense time. Beale even hints at a potential switcheroo related to this, suggesting that things might not be as settled as they seem.
It definitely makes you wonder if there are some hidden truths or unforeseen consequences related to actions taken during that period that are about to come to light. Remember, retrogrades aren't necessarily negative. They often act as a cosmic pause, a time to reassess and potentially redirect our course.
So it's like the universe is saying, hold on a second, let's take a closer look at this before moving forward.
Exactly. And this theme of revisiting and reevaluating is amplified by Venus retrograde, which kicks off on March 1st and lasts until April 12th. Venus is all about relationships, values, and finances. So during this retrograde period, we might find ourselves re-examining our connections, our priorities, and our relationship with money. Past relationships or financial decisions might resurface, giving us a chance to learn from them and make more aligned choices moving forward.
Oh, and we can't forget about Mercury retrograde, which also makes an appearance during this time. Mercury is associated with communication, technology, and travel. So when it's retrograde, things can get a little messy.
Yes. Mercury retrograde often gets a bad rap for causing miscommunications, tech glitches, and travel delays. But if we shift our perspective, we can see it as an opportunity to slow down, double-check our work, and be more mindful of how we're expressing ourselves. It's almost like the universe is encouraging us to pause, reflect, and refine our approach.
So with all these retrogrades happening simultaneously, it sounds like early 2025 is going to be a time of some serious introspection and potential course correction.
Absolutely. It's like a cosmic invitation to step back, reassess, and realign with our truest selves and our deepest values. And this theme of introspection is further emphasized by a rare astrological alignment occurring at the end of March, a stellium in Pisces. Now, a stellium is when several planets gather in the same zodiac sign, concentrating their energies. In this case, we have Neptune, Saturn, Venus, Mercury, and the North Node, all huddled together in Pisces during a partial lunar eclipse.
Wow, that's a lot of planetary power in one sign. And Pisces is already associated with dreams, illusions, spirituality, and intuition. So what happens when you add a dose of Saturn, the planet of reality and limitations, to this dreamy mix?
Well, Hogarth dramatically calls this alignment the Great Rude Awakening. And I think the name is quite fitting. It's like a cosmic reality check, a time when illusions are shattered, and we're forced to confront the truth no matter how uncomfortable it might be.
That sounds intense. So those who've been living in a fantasy world might be in for a rude awakening.
Precisely. Saturn in Pisces can bring about a sense of disillusionment, a realization that perhaps our dreams haven't been aligned with reality, or that we've been avoiding certain truths. It can feel like a bit of a crash landing, but it's ultimately a necessary process for growth and maturity.
And Beale describes Pisces as a special solvent before a major energy shift, which sounds kind of cryptic. What do you think she means by that?
Well, solvents dissolve things, right? So perhaps she's suggesting that Pisces energy, amplified by this stellium, is going to break down old structures, beliefs and patterns that are no longer serving us. It's like clearing the way for something new to emerge. But first, we need to let go of what's no longer working.
That makes sense. It's like a cosmic detox, a cleansing process before we can rebuild. And this theme of upheaval and potential chaos is further amplified by a specific conjunction. It's been on astrologers' radar for a while now. Uranus conjuncts the star Algol.
Yes, Algol, often called the demon star. It has a reputation for being associated with intense, sometimes destructive energy, sudden shocks and unexpected events. And Uranus, the planet of revolution, innovation, and unpredictable change, is essentially amplifying algol's already disruptive influence.
That sounds a bit ominous. And considering the timing of this conjunction, which coincides with the rising geopolitical tensions, especially regarding the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, it makes you wonder if we're about to see some major shifts on the world stage.
It's certainly a possibility. Uranus has actually been moving back and forth over algol since the summer of 2024, and each time this conjunction has been active, we've seen some pretty significant events unfold. Remember the Biden-Trump debates? That was around the time Uranus first aligned with algol.
Oh, wow. I hadn't connected those dots.
And shortly after that, there was the assassination attempt on Trump. Then, as Uranus went retrograde, it crossed back over algol around the time of the 2024 elections. And now, in March 2025, Uranus will make its third and final pass over algol, this time at 0 degrees of Aries, which is an incredibly potent degree in astrology. It's like a culmination of energy, a tipping point of sorts.
So knowing that this particular Uranus-algol conjunction has historically coincided with political dramas, assassination attempts, and elections, are we looking at potential global fireworks in March?
It's certainly a valid question, and one we'll explore further as we delve into the specific geopolitical predictions made by the astrologers. But before we jump into those, I think it's important to understand why this conjunction is considered so significant, especially in the context of geopolitics. Historically, algol has been linked to power struggles, sudden shifts in leadership, and even violence. Some astrologers see it as a harbinger of major changes in power dynamics, often occurring through unexpected and dramatic means.
And Uranus, with its unpredictable and revolutionary energy, is essentially adding fuel to the fire, so to speak. So when these two celestial bodies align, it's like a cosmic wild card is thrown into the mix. We can expect the unexpected, and events might unfold in ways that defy logic and reason.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just about events happening to us, but also about the potential for radical breakthroughs and innovations. Uranus is, after all, the planet of progress and awakening. So while this conjunction might bring about some challenges, it also holds the potential for positive change and transformation. It's about seeing the opportunity within the chaos.
If you are enjoying this show, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Join us on Spotify and YouTube because you won't want to miss the next parts of this fascinating astrological journey.
Now let's get into the specifics. Both Beale and Hogarth highlight several key areas that are likely to be focal points for this potent astrological energy. We'll start with the United States, which seems to be in for quite a wild ride.
Oh, I'm sure that will pique our listeners' interest. What exactly are these astrologers seeing in store for the U.S.?
Well, both suggest a period of significant upheaval and potential destabilization, with unsustainable policies and actions taken by the current administration as a key factor. Beale even goes so far as to say that the current administration is profoundly unlawful and hints at potential consequences for those actions.
That's a pretty strong statement. Do they elaborate on what those consequences might be?
Beale suggests that there might be more to the story. Regarding the 2024 election, pointing back to that Mars retrograde period, coinciding with the last weeks of the campaign, she mentions a potential switcheroo, possibly even a challenge to the election results.
Wow. That's a bit unsettling. So you're saying that the U.S. political landscape might be even more volatile than it appears?
That's certainly a possibility. There's a sense of things coming to a head, a reckoning of sorts. Beale even predicts that mid-March will be the end, for someone who has been a source of much chaos.
Okay. That's cryptic but intriguing. Is she talking about someone specific?
She doesn't name names, but she heavily implies that a major figure, someone central to the current political turmoil, might be facing a dramatic downfall around mid-March, whether that's through legal challenges, health issues, or some other unexpected event remains to be seen.
So listeners, keep your eyes peeled for a major shakeup in U.S. politics around that time. It sounds like things could get pretty dramatic.
Indeed. And it's not just internal affairs that are highlighted. The lunar eclipse in March is said to impact U.S. foreign relations, court decisions, and even belief systems. It seems like the country's role on the global stage might undergo a significant shift.
That makes sense. Considering how interconnected everything is, what about our neighbors to the north? How is Canada faring in this astrological storm?
Well, according to Beale, Canada is entering a 2-year period of reassessing its place in the world and its boundaries, particularly in relation to the U.S. She mentions the possibility of Canada becoming a stronger global player, even suggesting that Canadians feel betrayed by the current U.S. regime.
That's a pretty strong statement. It seems like the actions of the current U.S. administration are having ripple effects across the globe, causing other nations to reevaluate their alliances. and maybe even forge new ones.
Absolutely. And it's not just about political alliances, but also about values. There seems to be a growing sense of disillusionment with the U.S.'s role as a global leader, and other countries like Canada might be stepping up to fill that void, perhaps offering a different model of leadership based on cooperation, diplomacy, and a more humanistic approach to global affairs.
So while the U.S. might be facing internal turmoil and a shifting role on the world stage, Canada might be poised to emerge as a more influential and respected player. What a fascinating potential power shift.
Indeed, and Beale specifically mentions the new moon at the end of February as marking a refreshing of optimism and a recommitment to Canadian values. It seems like there's potential for Canada to embrace its unique strengths and contribute its voice to the global conversation in a more impactful way.
This is all incredibly fascinating. But I have to admit, it's a bit overwhelming to think about all these potential shifts happening simultaneously. What about other geopolitical hotspots? Does Europe factor into these predictions at all?
Absolutely. Both Beale and Hogarth emphasize the importance of the NATO chart, which will be directly impacted by the eclipse at the end of March.
What kind of impact are we talking about? Do they elaborate on what that might look like?
Beale doesn't get into specifics, but she does mention Russian cable cutting as a potential factor, hinting at possible disruptions or aggressive actions taken by Russia that could trigger a response from NATO. It's a bit cryptic, but it definitely raises concerns about escalating tensions between Russia and the West.
That's concerning, especially considering the already fragile state of affairs in Ukraine.
Yes, and Hogarth specifically highlights the absurdity of the U.S. and Russia holding peace talks without involving Ukraine, pointing at an article where Trump called Zelensky a dictator, while Putin was actually advocating for Ukraine to have a seat at the negotiating table.
Wow, that's a bizarre twist. It highlights the complexities and often contradictory nature of international diplomacy.
Exactly. It seems like there's a lot of power play and manipulation happening behind the scenes,
Yeah.
with the fate of nations and the lives of millions hanging in the balance.
Okay, so we've got the U.S. potentially imploding, Canada rising in power, Europe grappling with its role in NATO, and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine hanging over everything. It's a lot to take in, and I imagine our listeners might be feeling a bit anxious right now.
It's understandable to feel a sense of unease when confronted with such potent astrological and geopolitical predictions. But remember, this information is not meant to scare you, it's meant to empower you. By understanding the potential energies at play, we can make more informed choices and navigate these times with greater awareness and resilience.
That's a good reminder. We're not just passive bystanders in this cosmic drama. We have the power to choose how we respond and how we participate in shaping the future.
Exactly. And that's something we'll explore further in the next part of this deep dive. We'll delve into how these astrological events might be reflected in our personal lives, and what practical steps we can take to navigate this period with grace and resilience.
Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dive deeper into those personal implications and offer some practical guidance on how to stay grounded and centered amidst the potential chaos. It's going to be a fascinating conversation, so don't miss it.
Welcome back to the Allison Knows podcast.
Okay, so we've covered some pretty heavy geopolitical predictions. It's easy to feel a bit overwhelmed by all of this, right?
Absolutely. It's important to remember that while these global events are unfolding, they also have a way of showing up in our personal lives.
Right, it's like those ripples spreading out from a stone thrown into a pond. So how do we navigate these personal tremors?
Well, both of the astrologers we've been discussing, Beale and Hogarth, emphasize the importance of self-care and awareness during times of collective upheaval.
Beale, in particular, offers some really practical advice on how to manage our energy. She talks about emptying oneself, clearing and getting quiet.
That's such a powerful image, isn't it? It's about creating space within ourselves amidst the external noise and chaos.
I love that. So it's not about ignoring what's happening around us, but rather about finding that inner stillness so we can respond from a place of clarity, rather than getting swept away by the collective panic.
Exactly. And she stresses the importance of setting strong, energetic boundaries, which might sound a bit woo-woo to some people, but it's really about protecting our own well-being.
I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling of being energetically drained, especially when the world feels so chaotic.
Absolutely. It's like we're all sponges soaking up the energies around us. And if we're not careful, we can become overwhelmed by the collective anxiety and fear.
So how do we actually create those energetic boundaries? What are some practical tips?
Well, it starts with awareness, noticing how you're feeling physically, emotionally, mentally. What are the subtle cues that your body is giving you? Are you feeling tense, anxious, drained? Or are you feeling grounded, calm, centered?
It's like tuning into our own internal barometer so we can recognize when our energy is being depleted.
Exactly. And once you become aware of those shifts in your energy, you can start to take steps to protect yourself.
So what are some specific things we can do?
Well, mindfulness practices are incredibly helpful. Things like meditation,
Yeah.
yoga, spending time in nature.
Those are all great for calming the mind and reconnecting with our inner peace.
Right. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Even just taking a few deep breaths, stepping away from your phone and computer for a while, or simply focusing on the present moment can make a huge difference.
It's those little moments of pause throughout the day that can really help us reset.
Absolutely. And another important aspect of energetic self-care is being mindful of the information we're consuming.
Oh, that's so crucial these days. With the constant barrage of news and social media,
It's easy to get sucked into the negativity bias, where we're constantly bombarded with alarming headlines and sensationalized stories.
and that can really amplify our anxiety and fear.
Exactly. So it's important to be selective about what we're reading, watching, and listening to.
Maybe set some limits on our news consumption, or curate our social media feeds to include more uplifting and inspiring content.
Those are great strategies. It's about creating an energetic environment that supports our well-being.
And Beale also talks about the importance of distinguishing between our own fears and the collective fear that's swirling around us.
Yes, that's a really crucial point. It's easy to get caught up in the mass hysteria and start catastrophizing.
Like suddenly we're convinced that the world is ending.
Eh.
We're all doomed.
Exactly. But remember, not everything you're feeling is necessarily yours to carry. It's about developing the discernment to recognize what's truly resonating with your own energy and what's simply an echo of the collective anxieties.
So how do we tell the difference? How do we know if it's our fear or just the collective fear we're picking up on?
Well, it goes back to that body awareness we were talking about. Pay attention to your physical sensations. Are you feeling a tightness in your chest and not in your stomach? Or a sense of dread that seems to come out of nowhere?
Those are definitely signs that something is off.
Right. And then ask yourself, is this fear based on something concrete and specific in my life? Or is it a more generalized sense of anxiety that I can't quite pinpoint?
So if it's a vague, free-floating fear, it's more likely to be collective.
Exactly. And it's not to say that collective fears are invalid. They're often rooted in real concerns and anxieties that we're all sharing.
Like the fear of war,
Mm.
economic collapse, climate change. Those are very real threats that we're all facing.
Precisely. But it's important to recognize that when we're operating from a place of fear, we're not able to think clearly or make wise decisions.
Fear tends to cloud our judgment and lead us down a path of reactivity, rather than proactive, empowered action.
Exactly. So by becoming aware of when we're being influenced by collective fear, we can choose to step back, ground ourselves, and respond from a more centered and balanced place.
That's so empowering. It's like we're reclaiming our own agency amidst the chaos.
And remember, you don't have to do this alone. There are countless resources available to support you on your journey.
Like Beale's free resources on YouTube and her website. She has a whole playlist called Actions You Can Take that explores how we pick up energy from each other and what we can do to protect ourselves.
And she even offers a free downloadable course on her website on energetic empowerment.
It's amazing that she's making this knowledge accessible to everyone.
It is. She truly embodies the spirit of sharing wisdom and empowering others to navigate these challenging times.
So with all this focus on self-care and energetic boundaries, does that mean we should just retreat from the world and ignore what's happening around us?
Not at all. It's about finding a balance between inner peace and engagement with the world. Remember, these are times of great transformation, and we have the opportunity to be active participants in shaping the future.
So it's about harnessing our own energy and aligning it with a positive vision for the world.
Exactly. And that starts with taking care of ourselves so we can show up fully and contribute our unique gifts and talents.
Okay, so it's not about isolating ourselves, but rather about strengthening ourselves so we can be more effective in the world.
Precisely. And remember, this period of intense astrological energy is also a time of great spiritual awakening.
That's interesting. So how does that tie into everything we've been talking about?
Well, as old structures and belief systems crumble, we have the opportunity to connect with something deeper, to tap into a higher level of consciousness.
So this great rude awakening that Hogarth talks about might actually be a blessing in disguise.
It certainly has that potential. Remember, Uranus conjunct Algol can bring about sudden and unexpected change, but those changes can be catalysts for breakthroughs and innovations.
It's like the universe is shaking things up. to create space for something new to emerge.
Exactly. And it's a time for those with vision and courage to step forward and lead the way.
So even though things might feel unstable and uncertain right now, there's a potential for positive transformation and evolution.
Absolutely. It's a time to embrace the unknown, to trust in the process, and to believe in our collective capacity to create a brighter future.
Okay, I'm starting to feel a little more optimistic now.
Good, because optimism is a powerful force.
But how do we cultivate that optimism when the news is full of doom and gloom?
By connecting with your inner light. Remember, each of us carries within us a spark of the divine, a source of infinite wisdom and love.
That's beautiful.
Tap into that source, nurture it, and let it guide you.
And how do we do that?
Through practices like meditation, prayer, spending time in nature, connecting with like-minded individuals, and engaging in activities that bring you joy and fulfillment.
So it's about nourishing our soul so we can radiate that light out into the world.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we are all in this together, and that our individual actions, no matter how small, can contribute to a collective shift towards a more positive future.
That's a powerful message.
It is, and it's a reminder that even amidst the potential for global upheaval and personal challenges, there is always hope. There's always the possibility for growth, transformation, and evolution.
We are halfway through this fascinating episode. For those just joining us, a reminder to like, subscribe, and share this episode. You can also join the Allison Knows conversation on Spotify and YouTube.
Coming up in part 3 of this episode, we'll dive deeper into the practical implications of these astrological predictions, exploring what tangible steps you can take to navigate this period with grace and resilience.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Allison Knows podcast.
It's great to be back.
You know, it's one thing to talk about these global shifts and personal transformations on a conceptual level, but I'm wondering what practical steps we can actually take to navigate this potentially turbulent period. It feels like we need a game plan, a toolkit for resilience.
I hear you. And thankfully, both Beale and Hogarth offer some really concrete advice on how to prepare for and adapt to these astrological and geopolitical shifts.
So let's get down to brass tacks. What's the first thing we should be focusing on?
Well, both astrologers emphasize the importance of financial preparedness. With the potential for economic instability on the horizon, it's wise to review your finances, create a budget, and consider diversifying your investments.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about being proactive and creating a sense of security amidst the uncertainty.
Exactly. And it's not just about having a financial cushion, but also about being mindful of our spending habits and exploring alternative income streams.
So maybe it's time to dust off that side hustle idea, or finally commit to learning a new skill that could generate income.
Exactly. It's about empowering ourselves and taking control of our financial well-being.
And beyond finances, what other practical steps can we take to prepare?
Well, both astrologers also emphasize the importance of self-sufficiency and ensuring we have access to essential resources.
So we're talking about things like food, water, shelter, and basic medical supplies.
Exactly. It's about being prepared for potential disruptions to supply chains or essential services.
That's something we often take for granted until it's too late.
Right. So maybe it's time to start building a small pantry of non-perishable food items, or investing in a water filtration system.
It's like creating a safety net, just in case.
Exactly. And this is also where community comes in.
Ah, yes. The power of human connection. How does that play a role in navigating these times?
Well, both Beale and Hogarth emphasize the importance of building strong, supportive communities during times of upheaval.
It makes sense. When we're feeling isolated and alone, it's easy to get overwhelmed by fear and anxiety.
Right. But when we have a network of people we can rely on for support, encouragement, and practical help, it makes a huge difference.
So it's about reaching out to our neighbors, strengthening our bonds with family and friends, and maybe even getting involved in local community initiatives.
Exactly. It's about creating a sense of belonging, shared purpose, and collective resilience.
And that can be incredibly empowering,
Right.
knowing that we're not facing these challenges alone.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we're all interconnected and that we have the power to support and uplift each other.
So we've talked about financial preparedness, self-sufficiency, and community building. What about on a more personal level? What can we do to cultivate inner strength and resilience during these times?
Well, remember Beale's advice about emptying oneself, clearing and getting quiet.
Right. She talked about the importance of meditation, mindfulness, and creating energetic boundaries.
Exactly. These practices are incredibly powerful for cultivating inner peace, clarity, and resilience.
It's like creating a sanctuary within ourselves, a place of refuge amidst the external storm.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything complicated or time-consuming.
So even just 5 minutes of quiet reflection each day can make a difference.
Absolutely. It's about making those small, consistent efforts to connect with our inner selves, to recharge our batteries and find that sense of peace and grounding.
And it's also about developing a positive mindset, right?
Yes, that's so important. Remember, our thoughts create our reality.
So if we're constantly dwelling on worst-case scenarios, we're more likely to attract those experiences into our lives.
Exactly. But if we choose to focus on hope, gratitude, and the possibility of positive outcomes, we can shift our energy and create a more empowering reality.
It's about choosing to see the opportunity in the challenge, the silver lining in the cloud.
Exactly. And remember, even amidst the potential for global upheaval and personal challenges, there is always hope. There is always the possibility for growth, transformation, and evolution.
That's such a beautiful and reassuring message.
It is, and it's a reminder that we're not powerless. Even though the world might feel uncertain right now, we have the ability to choose how we respond.
So it's not about passively waiting for things to happen, but about actively shaping our own future.
Exactly. It's about embracing our power as co-creators and stepping into a new era of consciousness.
Well, that's a fantastic note to end on. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and guidance with us today.
It's been my pleasure.
It's been a fascinating exploration of astrology and geopolitics, and I hope our listeners feel empowered to navigate these times with greater awareness, intention, and resilience. If you are enjoying the show, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Join us on Spotify and YouTube because there is so much more to come. Thank you for listening to the Allison Knows podcast. Follow Allison on Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok.